Hello and welcome to this screencast. My name is Timo Ernst and in this tutorial you will learn how to use Framework 7 with AngularJS. Here on the screen you can see the application that we are going to create together step by step. It's a simple browser-based web application that's themed for native iOS look. As you can see, this website will just display a list of movies. If you click on one of them, the app will take you to a different view with more detailed information about the movie with a cool looking slide transition, which is already built into Framework 7. First, you will have to download a template that I created. It's a simple boilerplate for you to get things started quickly with Framework 7 and AngularJS. To download, go visit my GitHub page. You can find the link in descriptions below this video. Here, pick the one that says Framework 7 Pure Angular Template. On the next page, click the download button. Extract the files from the zip archive and copy everything to a web server of your choice. I'm using Apache on my local computer here, but basically you can use whatever you want. When you're done, you're already basically ready to go. There's not much more to do, there's no grunt or anything else involved. All you need are the files and a web server. Here you can see the file structure. Nothing special here, it's just a bunch of CSS, HTML, JavaScript files. If you want, you can rename the folder to a name of your choice. Next, make sure that your web server is up and running. I'm using MAMP on my Mac here. So everything looks fine, so let's start the app. To do so, open your favorite web browser, go to localhost, select the movies folder that you just created, and there we are, here's our app. Let me just bring up my DevTools here so we can emulate a mobile device. I'm using iPhone 5 here, but basically you can pick just whatever you want. If we click the link on the content section, we should be taken to a second page. And also we should go back to the index page when you click back. Okay, everything is looking good. Let's dive into the code. I personally like to use brackets, but any other editor will do just fine. Here we are. On the left-hand side, you can already see the file structure. But first of all, we have to do some text replacement. To do so, search in your project for the term My App and replace it with the name of your app. In this case, we will use just movies. Make sure to apply this replacement on all files in your project, not just a single one. As you can see, there are multiple files where this term occurs. Replace them all, or you can also just stick to My App if you want. It's basically up to you. The search term has now been replaced in all 5 files that you can see on the left upper side. Now we're ready to go. But first of all, let me just close these files. Okay, let's check out the code. On the left side, we have some CSS files for Framework 7, and also we have a main.css for your custom styles. Next is our index.html file. There's nothing special here, we're just referencing our style sheets. As you can see, we're using Cloudflare CDN here for our Framework 7 CSS files. Also, we're referencing our main.css. If you want to deploy this on your own, just change the URL. It doesn't really matter. Pretty much the same applies to our JavaScript files. We have AngularJS here, Framework 7, which are both delivered with a Cloudflare. We have our config file and our controllers for AngularJS. Next, let's check out our markup. First, you will see our navbar. This is the bar on the top of our app. There's one for our index page which is the starting point of our app, and one for the details page, which is the second page, where we will translate to when we click on the link. At the bottom of our file, we will see the content section. Framework 7 separates this into multiple pages. We have page 1, which is our index page, and page 2, which is our details page. In page 1, we have a link. As you can see, we are referencing here our details page. Make sure that the name is correct spelled. Okay, so far so good. There's so much more to tell about UI components from Framework 7, but for this moment, we'll stick to this and change to JavaScript. In our config.js file, there are two lines at the top. They're just there to turn off JSLint warnings. If you don't use JSLint or JSHint, you can also remove them. Below this, we have some configuration parameters which you can use if you want, but most likely you won't have to edit this file at all. It's just there to initialize AngularJS and Framework 7. Next, let's check out our controllers. If you're already familiar with AngularJS, then you already know that the controller takes care of the business logic for our user interface. As you can see, this controller requires an init service. This is already included in our template, and you won't have to edit or touch it at all. What this basically does is, it just waits for the DOM to be ready, and when it is, it will fire a ready event. It also supports Cordova, so if you're a PhoneGap developer, you can also use this template. There's nothing you have to worry about. It will just work. I strongly recommend to use this init service. Don't use jQuery ready, as it will really mess up things with AngularJS. As you can see, we can already see some console output. So this means everything is fine. We're ready to go. Pretty much the same thing applies to our detail page controller. There's no big difference here, except for the name of the controller. Okay, that's it. Now you know how the template works. Let's dive into the fun and write some code. Okay, let's get started. First thing we have to do is get the data. In this case, we're going to use Ajax to get this data from a JSON file, but basically you can use any other API that you want. This JSON data is available via HTTP on localhost. And as you can see, all the information about our movies that we'd like to display is included. Next, we have to somehow import this data into our app. As I already said, we are going to use Ajax for that. To do this, we are going to use the HTTP module, which is already included to AngularJS. Also, we're going to create a new Angular service, which we'll call data service. In order to create this service, just copy the content of the already existing init service to our new data service file, and then just remove all the unnecessary stuff. As a last step, rename the service to data service. Because we created a JavaScript file, we will also have to reference it in our HTML. As I said before, we're gonna use Ajax, so we need to import $HTTP, which is an Angular module. Again, don't use jQuery's Ajax functions, because otherwise you will run into big problems, because these methods are not compatible with Angular's data binding mechanism. As a first step for the implementation of our data service, we're going to create a variable called pub. In this variable, we're going to define all the methods and functions which should be available outside this service. Some people also like to call this variable exports. This is just a matter of convention though. You can call it whatever you want. So let's start by defining our first service method. In this case, we call it getMovies. Within this function, we're just gonna call $HTTP's get method in order to start the AJAX call. Okay, so far so good. Now we want to use this service from within our init page controller. So let's import the data service here. Let me just clean up code formatting a little bit so it's easier to read. Okay, now we are ready to use our data service. Basically, we could also directly use $HTTP from within our index page controller. But in most cases, when you create such an application, you also want to be able to do these AJAX calls from other controllers. So in order to reduce code duplication, we're going to use our own data service here. So let's check out how this works in the next step. Okay, so let's start implementing our index page controller. We want to start our AJAX call right when the app is ready. So remove everything in our event listener and call dataservice.getMovies. Remember that we already defined the path to our JSON file in our data service, so you won't have to pass it as a parameter. Angular's $HTTP module will return a promise. So just call .then and add two callback functions for success and error. Within our success callback, we will get the data from our AJAX call from an argument. Let's call it result. In our error callback, we will get an error object. So if an error occurs, we will just print it to console. If the AJAX call was a success, we will also just print the data for now. So let's test if things work. Hit refresh and we'll get an error here. So obviously we forgot to import our data service. So let's do that. Go back to our browser, hit refresh, and there we go. In our console, we see the data that we got back from our AJAX call. And as you can see, our data is an array, where each object represents a movie containing additional information about it, like for example the title or the URL to a poster image. Okay, now that we have the data, we need to somehow make it available to our user interface. To do that, we're going to use Angular's data binding technique. This technique allows us to bind all the data from our call to UI components in our HTML view. To do that, we simply define a new variable called movies in our scope and assign the result from our AJAX call to it. Okay, now let's switch to our HTML. In the next step, we're going to use a UI component from Framework7, which is called MediaList, in order to display the data that we just got from our AJAX call. So let's replace the dummy content from our template and go visit the documentation page of MediaList for Framework7. Here you can see some examples on how to use media lists in Framework 7. On the right-hand side, you also see a quick demo. There are various ways how to use media lists. You can use them with one image or without. You can one line, two lines, three lines. We'll just go for the first example. So let's just copy the first part of this code block and paste it into our project. There we are. Let's go back to our browser and check if everything works. As you can see, there is already a first list item from the example. So let's fill it with our data. We can remove the parts that we don't need. For this demo, it's enough to just have a title and a text part. In order to do that, we need to find out how the object attributes in our JSON response are called. So let's check this out. Basically, we just need the title and the synopsis. In order to write as few HTML as possible, we're going to use Angular's ng-repeat directive. By doing this, we can repeat as many list items as we have movies in our array. Now we can access the attributes of each movie. So in this case, we use title and synopsis. There's not much more to do here because Angular's data binding technique will take care of the rest. Okay, let's go back to our app, hit refresh and check if everything works. And yes, there we go. Here we have a full list of all the movies in our array. It doesn't look too pretty yet. We have some broken images and also some weird looking dots, so let's fix that. So first, let's just remove the dots. Next, we will take care of our images. There is no value in our image source attribute, so let's check our JSON data if we can find some images there. And yes, there we go. We have some poster images with their URLs, so let's paste them in. You can use HTML's standard source attribute, but I do not recommend it. It's better to use ng source, which is built into Angular. So let's refresh and check. Now that's looking pretty good. We have all our poster images, the bugs are fixed, and basically we're finished now with our list. There's one big issue though. If we click an item, nothing happens. So let's fix that. In order to do that, we go back to our HTML and set the right link target, which is in this case details page. If we click the link now, we will be taken directly to our details page. There is no content yet, but at least the sliding transition works. In order to show additional information for each movie, we need to somehow determine which movie was clicked. Also, we need to somehow find a way how to make our data available in our detail page controller, because currently this data is only available in our index page controller. This means that from within our detail page controller, we cannot access $scope.movies, and also we don't know which movie was clicked. So let's find a solution for this. First of all, you can remove the initialization code from detail page controller, since our app got already initialized in our index page controller. Next, we're going to bind a click event to our link. Don't use a standard click event here. Instead, it's better to use ngClick from AngularJS. Since we're still in the scope of our index page controller, we need to define our event listener in this controller. So let's test if this works by simply printing some console output to our log when an item was clicked. As you can see, when a movie was clicked, we get our movie data in console. So this works. Now we still have the problem that we somehow have to pass this information to our details page controller. A simple solution would be a global variable, which we can attach to our window object. But unfortunately, this is not a very good style and can lead to big problems, like for example namespace pollution. So let's do this the proper way and get rid of this code first. Now the best way to communicate between two controllers in AngularJS is to use a service. Since we already have a service, we can use that. In order to solve our problem, we are going to use events and a technique called loose coupling. Since we haven't defined any event bindings yet, we are just going to create a new function called addEventListener. This public method of our data service will get two arguments, which are the name of the event and a callback. In order to store all the callbacks, we just define a local variable called eventListeners. Now in this case, we're just going to call this event movieClicked. Also, since it is possible to write more than one event listener, we assign an array to this variable. So when our addEventListener method is called, we're just going to push the given callback into our list of event listeners. Okay, now that we have a way to add a new event listener, we just need to find a solution how to fire an event. In order to do so, we simply create a new public method called movieClicked, and we pass an argument of the movie that was actually clicked. So when this method is called, we simply iterate to all our event listeners and notify them that the movie was clicked. To do that, we simply call the callback that's stored in our array. Okay, now we are ready to use our new event system. So let's go back to our index page controller and simply call the method movieClicked from within our event listener in order to let it know that a movie has been clicked. So when this happens, our movieClicked function will iterate through all the event listeners and simply call their callbacks. In order to let those callbacks know which movie was clicked, we just have to pass this as an argument. Okay, now we are ready to use this new event system in our detail page controller. But before we do that, we first need to import our data service into our new controller. Okay, now that our data service is available in detail page controller, we can call all of its public methods. To register a new event listener, we just call dataservice.addEventListener and add our callback. In order to test if we didn't do any mistakes, we're just gonna add some console log and try this in our app. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now we know in our details page controller that movie was clicked, and we also know which movie. So as a last step, we just need to display our information from our movie in our detail page. So let's go back to our HTML and remove the dummy content from our template. To make things look a little more pretty, we're going to use a UI component from Framework 7, which is called card. So let's look that up in the documentation. On this page, you can see how a card works, how to use it, and also some working demos. On the right hand side, you can see how a card looks like. There are many different ways how to use them. You can use them with pictures or without. And if you want, you can add a footer. We're just going for the most simple one on the top. So let's just copy the example code and paste it into our project. In our case, we don't need the footer, so let's just remove it. Let's see if this works. Go back to our app and refresh. This looks alright. All we need to do now is replace the dummy content with our actual movie information. So again, we simply use Angular's data binding mechanism in order to bind the movie data to our UI component. Unfortunately, the variable movie is not available yet in our detail page controller because we're out of the scope of index page controller. So we need to change that. But this is an absolute no-brainer. So we just go back to our detailed page controller and set in our scope the movie that was clicked. So let's go back to our app, refresh, and check if we're done yet. And yes, there we go. We have finished our app. Before we end this video, there's one more thing I'd like to say. I know that it might sound complicated to separate everything into two controllers or more. But trust me, if you're in a big project and the code grows more and more, you really want your controllers to be as small as possible. So it's always a good idea to define one controller for each page. So thank you very much for watching my tutorial. If you want, visit my blog on timo-ernst.net. I usually write sometimes about web development in general with focus on Framework 7, Cordova, PhoneGap, HTML5 and JavaScript. If you want, you can also follow me on Twitter. To do that, just click on the link on the left. So thanks a lot for watching. If you like this video, please put your thumbs up. I would really appreciate it, and see you next time.